Welcome back to HealthTech for Patients. As we previously saw, from early years to adolescence to adulthood, our mental health is so important, and the factors not only of illness but environment which are going to impact on our lives. We are going to delve into this more deeply now with keynotes, videos, discussion, and it's time to welcome back our moderator, Anais Lukovac, who is joined by a panel of eminent speakers, both here in Paris and live on Zoom. So Anais, great to see you back, and so I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Alison. So our panel is Mental Health in a Challenging World, the Impact of Environments. I have amazing speakers next to me. They will introduce their work throughout the session, but I just want to mention them. So Hanna, Boka, the co-founder of Hope for Ukraine. We will have a video from her today. Marija Jevtic is from the University of Novi in the European Public Health Alliance. She will also intervene online. I can see you. Hello. We'll have also Lupi, who's right here. She's a clinical psychologist and teacher and trainer for Madrid for refugees. We have also Zofia Smoleń, the founder of MindMatch from Poland, and Rozina, Spinnoy, the founder of BIDS, that's my phone, no worries, from Belgium. So I'm going to make just a short introduction because I want to cut a little bit of my time to make sure that we have a nice conversation, that we also try to address questions from the audience. It is difficult. We have a very short time. So if your question is not being asked, please do not worry. Just keep sending us, and I'm sure when the video is published online, we can continue the conversation on YouTube and on the Health Tech Innovation Days in September. So basically, just quick notes before we start the session. First of all, when I introduced before, I forgot to mention one very important key aspect. As I said, if we ask for money, where do we spend it to support mental health? And I forgot to say the important need for connections. And supporting those connections so we don't work in silos. And I think this panel and the one beforehand as well, and the work that we see in my company in ClickLab, as well as with the Council of European Bioregion that I manage, is that the fact that we are here from the very different entities, from patients, clinicians, but also technological solution providers, pave the way to progress in supporting mental health. That's the first point I wanted to mention. When we talk about the impact of our environments, obviously no need to say that there's climate change, there's obviously a set of wars going on all across the globe, which impact enormously on mental health of refugees and on those that are involved, civilians in conflict, obviously. We had, I think mental health is extremely important. We are involved in a couple of projects that were mentioned in the previous session, but we also started with one that was addressing the access to healthcare for migrants and refugees in Europe, and in particular in terms of mental health. That was a few years ago, and I see a lot of progress in this. But it's important because we need to continue talking about mental health. We need to continue to connect it with the environment, with other diseases, with just population in general, so we increase awareness, but not only. We also find solution to address it. So maybe I will just stop here because I think we have an amazing panel. As I said, I hope we can have more time for discussion. So with no further ado, I would like to ask our panelists from European Public Health Alliance to start and talk to us about mental health inequalities in Europe. So, Marija, the floor is yours. For now,
Hello.
no sound.
Yeah. You are on mute, we believe. If you can unmute. That's
functioning
great.
now.
We can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, I would like to underline, I'm coming from non-EU country, but in EU, from Serbia, from University of Novi Sad, Faculty of Medicine. And I'm also member and president of Environmental and Health section of European Health Public Health Association. I think that I'm also group therapist, and my field of interest is as a public health expert, environmental health and mental health. And I think that environmental and mental health is deeply connected. Mental health inequalities in Europe are a significant concern, with the disparities observed across various social, economic, and demographic groups. These inequalities are influenced by social determinants such as income, employment, and access to healthcare services. These factors are also important for some decision, how people make decision in their life for migration, for example. But migration is also consequences of different kind of environmental factors. And for inequalities, when we talk about inequalities, we should mention that social determinants and are main factors, such as vulnerable groups and COVID also we should mention as a very important factor. But environmental factors contribute significantly to mental health inequalities across Europe. And these inequalities arise from combination of access to environmental goods, such, for example, green spaces, and exposure to environmental stressors, like air pollution, noise, climate change, and environmental weather. And we have as a consequences environmental disasters, floods and heat waves. And also urbanization, it's very important factors, because more than majority of human population live in urban areas. It means that we expected from urban areas that urbanization can bring us quality of life, but sometimes it's not always, we cannot expect that. So we have a lot of challenges in urban areas regarding the environment and mental health. And when we talk about health, we should mention different approaches of health. When we talk about health and mental health, we have we have to mention individual health, but public health, One Health approach, global health approach, planetary health approach is very important. And all these approaches tackle mental health at individual level, but also at population level. And it is very important to mention that when we talk about mental health, we talk about human health. But it is not only important human health, it is very important environmental health, for example, green spaces. And when we have enough green spaces or decrease of noise in urban areas, we will have decrease of mental health risks in urban areas. And also vulnerable groups are more exposed to all these environmental factors. I think that it's for starting enough, but also I would like to mention that we are now in a European Public Health Week. And yesterday, the day was dedicated to planetary health, and it means environmental health. The day before, it was dedicated to mental health. And I think and also this is the mental health week in Europe. And I think that it's very important to connect these two topics. As a member and president of Environmental and Health section in European Public Health Association, I also member of Urban Health section and Public Mental Health section. And these three sections are deeply connected, and we organized every year. We are dedicated to mental health as a topic in urban environment and in an environment. I think that it's also important to mention. So I think that we can
Thank you so much.
talk about it next.
Thank you so much, Marija. Now, I think that makes a great introduction on why it's so important to look at all across, let's say, sectors and connect. So we decided to put the session, let's say, in two kind of case scenario. So first of all, we're going to talk about concrete cases of how environment can affect mental health. And I would like to ask Laura Lupi, so from Madrid for refugees. You have 5 minutes, so I know it's tight, but to talk a little bit about your take on this.
You mean about migration or?
Yes, so I had the different challenges of displaced populations, so the reason to migrate, how they arrived. So
yes, it is a very complex situation because immigrants are not only going to face challenges when they arrived, they have also left very challenging situations. They are forcibly displaced for a reason, of course. So, and the trip itself is going to be sometimes challenging. And it is going to be very different for each immigrant, because if someone had more resources back home, or maybe the crisis didn't impact it as much as others, then they are going to come in with more resources, let's say, even economical resources sometimes. But for others, it's going to be more difficult sometimes if they had a more challenging situation. And then the trip itself is not the same of going in a plane than going by foot, for example, like many Venezuelans like me, who is part of the diaspora now, are having to walk all over South America in order to go to maybe Colombia or Brazil, or by foot, and crossing even the Darien, which is very difficult. So it also depends on the host country, and there is a very good metaphor that one of my former teachers, Dr. Manuel Llorens, was talking about, which is the metaphor of the trapezium, which is, it's almost like, you know, you're balancing yourself as an immigrant and you're jumping into the void, but what happens will also depend on who holds you and how they hold you, and the quality of the reception. And in that sense, one of the main challenges is to find a job, to find a means to work and make a living. And in my experience as a therapist with the diaspora and also in Madrid for refugees, mostly immigrants, as soon as they arrive, they don't have like a mind to work through the grief and the losses yet, or the trauma, but rather they are very focused on the drive to survive, to find a job. And in that sense, for example, in public policy, for example, elements like giving them access to validate their titles and their degrees, if they are professionals, for example, soon, is super important, because that's a really big challenge. It takes many, sometimes years, to validate your degree. So there are many immigrants who are underworked and underemployed, and that poses a big stress and challenge. As they get more settled, then comes the time to start working through the losses, to start working through the trauma, if there is any trauma, because it is not true that all refugees and immigrants are traumatized. They are just having normal reactions to abnormal circumstances. So it's important also not to pathologize migratory grief and to medicalize a grief related to trauma and migration. So yes, it is a very complex issue that depends on many factors, and that should not be, the weight should not be put only on the shoulders of the immigrants, but rather in the measure that the host country can also provide the means for the integration and allow for biculturality and multiculturality, then there is more chances also that the migrant can find a niche, a place, and feel like what they bring into the country is received and is valuable.
Thank you very much for starting the discussion. I think it's extremely interesting, and later on, I'm sure we'll talk also about potential solution to support that and how technology can enhance it. I will go back to Marija, because we also wanted to know a little bit more about a concrete case study on the floods in Serbia and how this can affect obviously mental health. So Marija, the floor is yours again.
Thank you. As I mentioned, that natural disasters, which are becoming more frequent and severe due to climate change, have immediate and long-term impacts on mental health. And we had the experience in 2014. Before a few days, it was 10 years after the floods in Serbia. And I think that this period is very good for discussing what we did in the field of mental health of people which are tackled by floods. Floods pose significant risk both on human communities, and we have experience immediately after floods with post-disaster needs assessment in different sectors, and I was responsible for health sector, and I saw a lot of health professionals with mental health consequences after these emergencies, and also a lot of people who stayed without houses and without for example, memories, and some, it's not only about money, it's about memories, it's about some cultural heritage, some very important goods for at individual level. And now we can talk about post-disaster needs assessment and that we need to develop resilient communities. But we should work in all world, because of climate change and environmental disasters, in two tracks. How we can make more resilient communities regarding environmental factors like climate change, air pollution, noise pollution, water and sanitation, for example, without that is basic needs. And then in parallel, we should work on strengthening mental health and preparedness community for future risks, because we can see that we can expect a lot of environmental disasters and emergencies due to environmental risks in future. And I think that vulnerable groups like women, children, and people over 65 or 70 are in very higher risk after some environmental disasters. And we have one very important issue. Climate change is not only like floods, 3 or a few days or a few weeks, but climate change is a chronic disaster, and we should prepare for it. And eco-anxiety as a mental health consequences among young people, it's increased, and we should be aware of it. And psychological, we should need this. We should develop some psychological and social support before, due to climate crisis, and after some consequences and disaster risks.
Thank you so much for that. So now I would like to pass it. We have a live video from Hanna Boka. So I think we can pass it on. She's again the co-founder of Hope for Ukraine. And I think this intervention can also help us understand when in conflict, and unfortunately there are conflicts all across the globe, mental health is obviously a huge issue. So if we could pass on the video of Hanna, please.
Mark in the bathroom. Bob is also scared. For 3 years, we have been waking up to the explosions. It's horrifying.
It's horrifying to sleep during explosions, not only for Kyiv residents like Victoria, but for the whole country. It's horrifying to see the aftermath of Russian central cities after the liberation of cities. Hello, my name is Hanna Boka. A few words from my own experience. It was horrifying to read your home was attacked. It was horrifying to read your home was attacked while you were pregnant and alone abroad at that moment. It was horrifying to lose the contact with the entire family and due to the immense stress to lose the long-awaited baby. So now talk to you about how these feelings of horror affect the mental health of Ukrainians. About me, as a military correspondent, I've been working in Eastern Ukraine for 5 years. So for me, the Russian invasion in Ukraine began in 2014. Since 2022, I've been a co-founder of non-profit foundation. That's why today my goal is not just to introduce you with patient profiling, but also to invite you to participate in 2 rehabilitation projects. A leap forward, you can donate or provide technical equipment for 2 rehabilitation projects. To treat post-traumatic stress disorder, we need technical equipment for treatment with VR technology or neurofeedback. For work with childhood traumata, you can also help by donating to create a web resource. Just click on the QR code. I will leave it here during my speech and on my LinkedIn page. So this war is so vast and complex that there are hundreds of topics for discussion. However, I will focus on Ukrainians' collective trauma. Ukrainians' collective trauma, how footage of shootings and killings re-traumatize millions. We experience the most complex information war in human history. We witness everything practically in real time, which leads to even greater trauma without limits. For the pharmacists and IT startups, I have to say, in Ukraine, prescriptions for stress medications increased 100-fold. Additionally, there are now such complex diseases or surgeries that your technologies or developments can be great benefit for millions of people. Therefore, the World Health Organization has already predicted the recovery will take about 20 years. But already today, you can ask doctors of any field, be it a surgeon or gastroenterologist, and they will all first point out the problems with the mental health of patients.
Simplest example, before the war, an anesthesiologist in our operations did nothing. They were just present, just in case. Now in our clinics and in the other clinics, the surgery will not be performed without the presence anesthesiologist, because the patients may have a hypertensive crisis, panic attacks in their operating room, and inadequate perception of pain.
Stress has affected millions of Ukrainians, confirms the leading psychiatrist Professor Oleg Chaban, and claims this is a collective trauma.
За статистикою зростає кількість депресивних розладів, тривог.
The scientific understanding of collective trauma arose after the Second World War, when even transgenerational changes were acknowledged.
Колективна травма – це нове для нас.
Collective trauma touches on the cultural and mental aspects of humanity.
Ми якраз спробуємо дослідити, використовувати.
We will attempt to study by adapting the scales of our American colleagues. If successful, we will be able to investigate genetic changes in the next generations whose parents experienced these trials.
Дослідження після Другої світової війни, конкретно Нідерландів.
Studies conducted after World War II, for instance, in the Netherlands, where 100,000 people experienced a famine during the winter, showed that children born to this population were prone to diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and other diseases. For example, in Syria, there were more cases of allergic diseases.
В Сирії, наприклад, більше алергічних хвороб.
Briefly about the most sensitive topic in the war, children. It's a separate, complex issue, but I want to highlight a gentle tool for childhood traumas developed by a children's author in collaboration with psychologists.
Bonjour les enfants.
Bonjour, madame.
Marina hands out emotion scale cards. After reading, children can judge how happy or crying the character was. Gradually, they learn how to express their own traumata.
Verbalizing it, we took this hard experience out from the unconsciousness and put in the fundament of personality to grow, to make us stronger, to cope with. Because a lot of children, they are vulnerable, they afraid to speak or even to think about their pains. But in the book, all the terrible things happened not with me, but with him, with the character of the story. So he can overcome his difficulties, and I could do the same myself.
To expand this project beyond one school in Kyiv, we need to develop an online platform with video reading and recipes for addressing issues based on books. So let's summarize. Collective trauma leads to a massive post-traumatic stress disorder, chemical and digital dependencies will increase the demand for medication. Today, we have not addressed the issue of Ukrainian refugees, who number over 6 million, mostly women and children. We haven't mentioned families of fallen soldiers or the condition of the soldiers themselves, which is over 6,000 men enduring combat missions that are more difficult than in World War II. We haven't talked today about people who escaped occupation and suffered torture, severe rape, mutilation. We haven't addressed the stress of people who lost their homes and have to rebuild their lives from scratch. I remember searching my home on the internet dozens of times a day during the occupation of my city, Irpin. I wanted to see if there was anything to fix. Day after day, practically in real time, I watched how my city been destroyed. Irpin was almost 70% destroyed, but residents rebuilt it in almost a year, and I'm very proud of that. As donors around the world began to support, the city recovered more quickly. The same goes for mental health. In Ukraine, there is already a national population preservation program, How Are You? There is a massive retraining in mental health for all doctors of various specialties. We already have many high-quality programs and specialists, but the problem are many times greater. So I hope for a positive feedback regarding VR technologies and neurofeedback. Also, click on the QR code, donate for children. The results of this project we will publish on social media. Ultimately, a very symbolic video for the whole of Ukraine. 12 years old Yana Stepanenko ran a 5-kilometer Boston Marathon to raise money for a prosthetic leg for a Ukrainian defender. Yana lost both legs during the Russian shelling in 2022. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, hard images, and I want to thank Hanna for joining through this video, showing us the consequences of conflicts, and that could be from anywhere in the world, unfortunately, but there are conflicts and there are consequences on mental health, and it's really important that we have it in mind and that we support, regardless of any political issue, the victims and affected by those conflicts. In any case, now we've seen the hard parts. It's emotional. It's hard to see this. We know there are tough conflicts, and again, climate change, as Marija mentioned before. In the second, let's say, part of the talk, we wanted to focus on how do we navigate through this, because I think one of the great thing about this HealthTech for Care, HealthTech Innovation Day, is trying to find good solutions for this and where technology can support. So now that we get into the navigating life with mental illness and shaping a resilient environment, I would like to go back to you, Laura, and if you could give us a little bit from the Madrid for Refugee experience, the physical landscape in depressed and non-depressed individual. If you could elaborate a little bit on how do you examine the effects of the environmental factor?
Yes, there are two very different issues. I'm going to start with Madrid for Refugees and what we do. It is related to what we were talking about before. There are many NGOs and many political and non-political organizations helping out refugees. And Madrid for Refugees detected that there was a lack of a training and support in the professionalization and the training of immigrants and refugees in order to enter the workforce more quickly. And that is basically what they focus mostly on. Other NGOs are already taking care of the mental health aspect, and other like housing aspect. But Madrid for Refugees mainly focuses on training and in, for example, coding. We have a coding training, which is for free, and it is provided by professionals, engineers and technicals. English lessons as well, which is a plus when you're going to find a job, and also, for example, how to write a CV, how to look for a job, so that they can enter and insert themselves in society as soon as possible. That also provides a space for them to create community, which is essential for mental health. And also there are other activities like, for example, the Chefugee, which is activities in which people go and cook dinner from or lunch from their own home country, and they share it. And those kind of cultural rituals are super important to work through the ambiguous grief that migration represents, because you have left a place that still exists. So it's a very difficult grief to do. It's a very special kind of grief. So bringing what has been lost into the present, into the new context by, for example, sharing food or practicing these cultural rituals in community is a way of working through the grief itself, actually. So, and that brings me to the physical space. Madrid is a very green space and a city. I mean, it has many, many, many parks, and I think it is essential for mental health. When I was doing my clinical psychology research, I did a research of how the environment, specifically if it was built, natural or mixed, would impact the restorative capacity, which is the ability to restore focused attention, which is limited in humans, and how it also impacts positive emotions and aesthetic judgment, and also the image complexity or the complexity of the environment. In that study, we found that for depressed individuals, it didn't matter the content of the environment. They preferred low complexity, which was very interesting, maybe because they were depressed, they were hyper processing in details, and therefore they were losing, you know, it was more difficult to process more complex information of the environment. But rather, when people were non-depressed, they preferred natural environments of low complexity. Maybe because in this study in particular, the images had water. And one of the findings that I thought was interesting as well is that the images that were preferred had this certain quality in which the environment had a kind of like a stream or a road that went like behind a tree or behind the mountains. And that is what is called fascination in environmental psychology. So maybe if the environment elicits us the need to imagine what could be behind the mountains or behind the trees, then that could activate elements of search and imagination that could be pleasurable for the brain and could be adaptative as well, because as human beings, we had to try to imagine what was behind the tree or behind the mountain in order to go look for other resources.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting approach, let's say, and we discovered by getting to know you the environmental psychology. So I would like to give the floor to Rozina Spinnoy. I hope she's online. I'm not sure we can see her. Rozina?
I'm online. Can you hear me?
Yes. So very nice to see you again. Just for the quick story, we met with Rozina last year at a mental health event, and I was absolutely thrilled to listen to her and actually the work that she does with BIDS and the relation with mental health and the urban environment. So, Rozina, the floor is yours to explain to us a little bit what you do and how this urban environment is so important to mental health as well, and how we deal with it.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And thank you for the invitation. So indeed, I work for an NGO. I'm the founder of an NGO which works around co-designing inclusive and sustainable communities, as well as being an active member of Mental Health Europe, I have to say, and recently, a few months ago, having joined the World Health Organization's Pan-European Mental Health Coalition. So indeed, I think as we've heard already, it's a world, of course, filled with lots of challenges. And I also am someone with lived experience with having a son that had mental health challenges and my late mother also. So a lot of my experience comes from that angle, as well as being a designer and looking at some of the strategies around co-designing solutions. And so, of course, it's really imperative that we address the critical aspect of the sort of human well-being and mental health. And I want to really delve deeper into the profound sort of impact of our environment, as mentioned previously, of course, in the session, and how this affects our mental health and the urgent need also of this collective action. We're hearing, of course, co-creation being the focus of the European Mental Health Week this week, and I'm a great believer in this, that we need to have everyone from policy making to practitioners to those with lived experiences really working together. I also had the pleasure of being invited earlier this week to the policy roundtable of that Mental Health Europe had, with co-creation being the start of this important week with the EU Commissioner also. So I think it's important to kind of consider some of these factors. I work in various realms around the sort of urban design, public space. Of course, we know that there's lots of neuroscientific evidence, and this really sort of underscores the intricate relationship between our urban environments and our mental health. The bustling streets, towering sort of buildings, concrete jungles that we live in, of course, they either nurture or deteriorate our mental health. Studies have, of course, shown that exposure to green public spaces and green spaces, natural environments, significantly, of course, reduce that cortisol and stress, anxiety, and depression. But of course, in our sort of fast-paced urban landscapes, it's not easy to access such sanctuaries. And of course, we've seen it also during COVID period. It really highlighted and exacerbated the inequities, of course, when it came to those that had access to green public space and those that didn't. But it's not just about the sort of physical access. For me, so much is about community care, and especially someone with that lived experience also. You know, as the proverb goes, of course, it does take a village to raise a child. So, of course, similarly, it takes a community to support mental health. We must ensure that mental health support is not only accessible, but it's also really embedded within our communities. Families play a pivotal role in this support system, and we must equip them with the necessary resources and education to really recognise and address mental health challenges. It's not just down to the health professionals and the system, but we really must think about the community in a holistic aspect that involves the training and awareness at all different levels, from grassroots community initiatives to also governmental authorities. And there I also talk very much, and as you know, when I spoke also at on World Mental Health Day, I speak a lot also about the authorities, from police officers, educators, healthcare providers. We need to really have the right response and have that training in place to really foster that culture of understanding and empathy. We need to really dismantle that stigma surrounding mental health and create more supporting environments. And also, of course, as mentioned, when we link about sustainability and climate change and that access to the clean air, to the public spaces, as mentioned, it's not a luxury. This is a fundamental human right. Without sustainable care for our environment, we really jeopardize our physical and mental health and resilience. So, and also we must take an intersectional and inclusive approach. When we think about our community, we must include all the diverse communities. I mean, we also, with the co-creation aspect, as mentioned, it really sort of made me think about how can we realise a systems approach to an inclusive, integrated co-creation in mental health? What are the various tools available and the different strategies available? Thinking of the training and capacity building for ensuring that access and understanding for all, implementing the training programmes to really enhance the skills and competencies of professionals, and thinking of those community engagement strategies. What are the tools out there? What are the digital, online, offline tools? How can we really, also think about the data and the analytics there for, having the support systems, harnessing the power of data analytics, decision, for our support systems, and to analyse the population kind of health data, really identifying those disparities and inform with sort of evidence-based decision-making in mental health, from policy to practice. And of course, thinking about the community engagement, going back to that, which is the approach I really took of this participatory design approach, making sure that all voices are around the table, having these co-design workshops involving communities in the design implementation. And also, when we think about how are we evaluating our mental health sort of services, how can we do that from top down, bottom up, taking a transversal approach? What are the kind of collaborative platforms? I sort of bottom up was reaching out to some of the networks that are around my son and thinking, how can we brainstorm together? What is a platform? Is it a digital platform? Is it an offline platform? How can we create something that's accessible to understand from the laws and policies, to also what are the organisations, who are the organisations, who are the community support groups, how can we access and create something around this and potentially scale it up? So really thinking about these kind of resources. So really I could go on about all the different sort of tools and strategies. I won't go into that too much, of course, but really there is no sustainability in essence without care, and care for ourselves, care for our communities, and care for our planet.
Thank you so much, Rozina, for joining and taking the time. I will pass to our last but not least speaker here on the roundtable, because as I said previously, it's the HealthTech for Care. So we're in HealthTech, and we got a great innovator next to me. So Zofia, could you tell us a little bit about what you brought and what you designed as a really great application, I guess, and technological tool for mental health?
Yeah, so Laura and Rozina before talked about new ways of treatment. I'd like here to retract to rather traditional, more popular ways of treatment that most people are getting, which is psychotherapy and pharmacotherapy, and talk about the problems with that and how tech can solve them. So assume that, for example, you're a migrant, you're in a new place, you feel sad, and at some point you decide that this kind of feeling is unbearable anymore, you have to treat it. So you go to a doctor. But hold on, what doctor? Psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists? Assume that you're not yet up to psychiatrical treatment, you're just checking out. So, okay, psychologist or psychotherapist. Most people don't know the difference. So assume you Google it, you find out that psychotherapist is basically 4 more years of education, and you decide to go for a psychotherapy. But it's not the end of your problems. In fact, it just started because there's hundreds of different psychotherapy types, and each one has different efficiency for different illnesses, for different symptoms, and it's very difficult to navigate in this area without having any previous knowledge about it. So what most people do, they just choose randomly at this point, and that's a pity because different treatment, the one that is not right for you, might mean no improvement in your mental health. So that's one area that needs to be tackled. And another one is that's not the only thing that could go wrong. For example, assume that you found help, you're getting the treatment, and now you can as well be very easily misdiagnosed. In fact, about 40% of patients with severe mental illnesses are misdiagnosed, and this is mostly true for schizophrenia. And why is that? So, mental illnesses are often comorbid, which means that they often go together. So, for example, depression, OCD, panic disorders go often together with schizophrenia, and it's very similar for bipolar disorder, and yeah, the majority of bipolar disorder patients have also some other illnesses like substance abuse or anxiety. And that's one thing, comorbidity. The other thing is very similar symptoms. For example, the only very, very distinguishable symptom of schizophrenia are hallucinations, but it is said that in early stages of schizophrenia, it might look very much like depression. So you might be misdiagnosed at the very beginning. Also, mood swings in bipolar disorder are very, very typical in another disorder, which is borderline personality disorder. So illnesses get mistaken all the time. It's all very intertwined, and in fact, there's a growing number of researchers who suggest that those disorders that we talk about are in fact just symptoms of disorders that we don't even know about yet. Yeah, because the disorder classification in psychiatry is very arbitrary, based on symptoms, not on causes. And this is very, very distinct from the rest of the medicine, because, for example, imagine if somebody mistook pollen allergy with a flu. Symptoms, very similar. Treatment, very different. And basically wrong treatment, wrong classification. Misdiagnosis means wrong treatment. So in psychiatry, where we don't really know the causes, we just know the symptoms, it's a common problem all the time. And yeah, why is that? It's mostly because it was very easy it was way easier in normal medicine, in the rest of medicine, to just inspect blood under the microscope and see that there's some bacteria and there is not. In mental disorders, we cannot do that easily. There's like millions of connections between brain and then the brain activity is still not really understood, and there's a lot of factors like in genes and environment, as we talked about just now, that could impact the mental health. So yeah, basically that's why psychiatry right now is at the stage where the rest of medicine was like 100 years ago. And yeah, so it looks all very hopeless. What are our options? And what I will still go back to the first stage where I talked about how person looks for a psychotherapy type. And here I will talk about what MindMatch, my startup, does. So basically, we let a person describe the issue they have, including the symptoms, they like general situation. And then we use AI to recognize symptoms in the description, and then to the symptoms we recommend the psychotherapy types that are recommended by research, and this way we basically save time for a person. They don't have to make a whole research about all psychotherapy types available and choose the right one for themselves. Without a psychological degree, you can still make an informed decision. Yeah, that's what we do, and we helped so far 1,500 people. And we know, for example, that only 8% of our patients ditch a therapist after the first meeting, while in general it is estimated to be from 30 to even 50%, according to several studies. Yeah, and we have those case studies when we know that somebody, for example, went for a psychotherapy for a first time in their life and then chose what we recommended, and then they're happy about the psychotherapy they chose. They feel that it's making impact. So yeah, it's all very hopeful, let's say. And then about the other part, the classification of mental disorders and the discovery of the risk factors. And here I think that artificial intelligence has actually a big shot about, for solving some of those problems, because the problem here is that human researchers cannot very well analyze the amount of data there is for mental disorders. So, as I said, brain connections, genes, some proteins, and AI has this thing that it's very, very good in analyzing and discovering very weak even patterns in big loads of data. So it is actually a hope for us to discover something that we haven't seen yet, and it's as well for environmental factors, but then for genetical factors. If we know the causes, because we discovered it with artificial intelligence, then we can come up with right treatments. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think after seeing all the and listening to all of you, it's going from not so hopeful to there is hope. So I would like now to also ask our viewers, if you have any questions, please send them in. We have a little less than 15 minutes to have this nice discussion around impact mental health. And maybe I would like to ask Rozina, because as Zofia just mentioned, how technology, and I would like to ask all of you a little bit the same question, So how to improve mental health well-being within the environment, but I would ask you if you could give any insights on any, let's say, more health tech or tech-related potential solution. Just to give an example, and I pass it on to Rozina, there are current studies saying that, for example, chatbots to detect, mental health in some cultures, people feel it's easier to talk to a machine about mental health because of stigma or many others, whereas others prefer to actually talk to a real person and are not confident in where the data is going on when they interact. So very interesting actually things coming up. But so Rozina, any great solution in also involving technology to improve mental health and within the environment?
I can talk about, I think some of the things I've come across, maybe not within the public realm of the sort of urban space, of course, other than to measure air quality and all these kind of citizen participatory projects that were happening also with using digital. But there was something regarding AI that I found really interesting, that I remember reading that I think Japan or one of the Southeast Asian countries was doing, which I thought was very interesting. With algorithms, they were able to predict who would be more suicidal in schools, because of course we know that suicide rates within sort of young men in Europe is also very high. Is it not? I think the second most highest cause of death, I think, I believe. But I remember sort of chatting to school directors and thinking, when we know that there's lots of anxiety, depression, wouldn't something like this help them? Because this was done at a very community sort of level, where schools were able to actually use AI and be able to input data from those that were affected with mental health challenges and those that would be at high risk. And so algorithms could certainly detect who would be at more risk. So I think there's a huge potential with AI that we need to be looking more at in Europe, I think. So that was just one example that came to my head.
Thank you so much, Rozina. Maybe I can ask Marija from European Public Health Association. Any great solution, or at least any hints, example with health tech, mental health, and the related environments?
We can use and we should use artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is here. But we shouldn't forget nature-based solution. And I would like to reflect on example about psychotherapist. I'm group therapist. So I know that it is a very good example that we need. For me, it's conversation, psychotherapy, it's nature-based solution. So we shouldn't forget contact human to human and learn how we can use artificial intelligence. But in urban area, when we talk about environment, we should develop intersectional and collaboration between, for example, public health experts and architecture and urban planners, and develop salutogenic cities, green areas, use more water as resources and safe water quality. And we need the urban gardening, for example, in the future. These components and positive components for developing mental health, opposite of air pollution and noise, like very present risks.
Thank you so much. I think it's very well, in very complementary measure where we can use technology as a mean. Laura, what's your take on that?
Well, it's a very interesting topic. I would say that still human contact is curing in itself, and especially there are many studies that says that regardless of the kind of psychotherapy, of the orientation of psychotherapy, what heals is the therapeutic relationship. And in that sense, I would say that AI can be very useful for research, for example, or almost as how we now use not computers, calculators, for example, like have it as a tool, but even when a patient is not going to stay with a therapist, the fact that the therapist is listening and that this person is having a space in which another mind is having them in mind is healing in itself, and that an AI cannot do.
Okay, thank you so much. So, what is your take? You use technology, you use AI. Any other example maybe that you have seen, or on that concrete solution, how to improve mental health?
Yeah, so I kind of have a divided opinion here. So we should use AI in areas where it's actually useful, and then there are areas, like for example, there are chatbots that try to replace psychotherapists, where it's not necessarily useful yet, at least. I cannot tell about the future, but yes, a huge part of psychotherapy is actually having somebody listen to you and feeling that yeah, your words are landing somewhere in somebody's brain. So yes, for the, like for example, there's like WoWbot developed some time ago, some other chatbots that try to imitate psychotherapists. It's not clear to me, to be honest, like it's not that helpful yet. It's a question whether it will be in the future. But yeah, artificial intelligence in terms of like discovery of new treatments or like the causes of the mental disorders, it's one of the best ways to use it. Then to recommend psychotherapy treatments, because it just can like recognize some patterns. That's still okay. There are also like as a, not the main psychotherapy, but as a contribution to it. For example, there are those little apps that are like ask a person every day how do they feel, and then assign some mostly cognitive, based on a cognitive behavioral therapy homeworks to do, things to think about based on the input. It's also very helpful.
Thank you so much. I think it goes in line with one of the questions we received. So, and I think it's not just about mental health. It's just the world in general, how we work. Aren't we afraid that not AI is going to take over, but if we lose that human connection that you all mentioned? So maybe I can ask Marija, what do you think on that? Because you mentioned the importance of being connected to the environment. To someone who would be, let's say, scared that AI would put us in a robot world, what would you say?
So I think that we all should learn and use artificial intelligence as a tool. And for example, a lot of medical doctors also afraid that artificial intelligence will change our everyday work and replace medical doctors, but that is not the case. I think that we can use artificial intelligence as we learn about it. And opposite, I would like just to add something very important, that also psychotherapists should learn about environment and about eco-anxiety and new risks for every individual. So a lot of challenges nowadays is present, and just one sentence, I think that air pollution, for example, is a major health risks and environmental factor, but without peace, we cannot achieve anything. So today, First of all, we need peace for mental health.
Thank you so much on that. Rozina, maybe just because we're getting to the end of the session, so we have time also for the conclusion afterwards. Rozina, maybe one last word on I'm not sure if the same question, but in urban development, in your expert, and you mentioned also before the connection that are needed with policymakers, stakeholders all across. What, let's say, where do you see the next step in actually getting this environmental question into the promotion and improving on mental health?
I think, yeah, thanks for that question. I actually think it's already happening in some way. Hence, even events like this, where we're creating awareness and it is having an interdisciplinary approach and involving multi-stakeholders in the conversation. And I think when we're talking about inclusive, sustainable, healthy communities, and even programs like the European Commission's, the new European Bauhaus, for example, which I also happen to be a community member of that, you know, we can't talk about one without the other. We know the impact of urban green spaces and this, you know, the health impact this has on us and the mental health, not just physical health. But also this holistic approach like we spoke about, that we need to be bringing in all sectors. I mean, I'm even talking about the arts, culture, education, the sports. All of this links also to our mental health. And just like Marija had mentioned before, of course, taking this nature-based solution aspect. So I think we're already seeing this kind of cross-pollination as such, because we're seeing more and more awareness over the years, certainly with mental health being up there in the agenda and being regarded as being as important as physical health. And I think for it to be a cross-policy aspect, and we're seeing more and more people sharing this sort of open lived experiences, the positive and the negative. So I really believe it is about this co-creation, as Mental Health Europe is doing also with their focus this week, that it is better together. We need to be sharing, we need to be having the dialogue, and we need to be seeing, you know, the art, as mentioned before. I mean, I'm a designer, so bringing the architects, the designers, the urban planners, the policy makers, the city makers together and seeing what does it really mean? How does it translate to have a healthy environment? And as mentioned also, we see these the rise of these community gardens and the aspects of bringing community together or creating places that allow for that interaction for young and old to, you know, get out of that social isolation aspect. So we need to be creating these sort of spaces, safe spaces online as well, but also these kind of safe spaces in the public realm that bring together this spontaneous interaction and within the sort of green public spaces. So I think we're starting to see it. We're starting to see this, the benefit of what co-creation is across all different topics, that we start seeing the link and having a bit more of a systemic view and systemic thinking.
Thank you so much, Rozina. I wish I had more time because I really enjoyed the discussion, but I think we need to close. I just would like to obviously thank all of my fellow panelists. I had a question, and please, if you are a refugee or migrant, I think just already, because there was a question from a person on this, on what do I do, how can I connect? So I would advise to just already look at Madrid for Refugees or any association like that that will definitely be able to help you out. Again, thank you so much to all. There's hope. Definitely there's things ongoing, and I think after the discussion, I'm still sure that technology can be actually very helpful. Not the solution, but extremely helpful to continue with promoting mental health.
Thank you so much, then Anais, Hanna, Marija, Laura, Zofia and Rozina. Thank you very much indeed for a very rich and powerful roundtable. Now our event is already drawing to a close. We're going to take a very short break. Coming right up after that, we will have the closing word, the concluding word, with the Vice Chairman of the Endowment Fund, HealthTech for Care, Christian Polica. So see you just in a few seconds. Thank you.
You.